No one truly cares, not because they are cruel, but because it is the state of reality we refuse to accept. How would your life change if you embraced the brutal truth that every person pursues their own interests, leaving you alone with your struggles? What secret wisdom lies hidden in accepting this harsh fact? In this story, discover how Stoicism transforms this painful acceptance into unparalleled freedom and resilience. In a crowded city buzzing with thousands of stories, there was a man named Marcus who felt utterly invisible. Despite the relentless noise around him, a gnawing silence haunted his mind. No one truly cared. This was not an abstract loneliness, but a piercing realization, deeper than mere solitude. Marcus sensed that beneath every polite smile, every passing glance, lurked an indifferent Truthiverian was wrapped tightly in their own existence. This bitter pill, once swallowed, ignited a profound transformation. But how did Marcus come to this realization? And why did acknowledging such a harsh truth shatter his despair instead of deepening it? Marcus, a mid-level manager in a corporate maze, had spent years chasing validation through success, popularity, and outward approval. He believed that if he could prove his worth to others, he would be seen, appreciated, maybe even loved. His phone was always buzzing, his calendar packed, and his social media feeds curated to project the illusion of a fulfilled life. Yet, night after night, he lay awake, shaken by a feeling no achievement could soothe. The fundamental insignificance of his existence in the eyes of everyone else. One evening, after a draining day filled with superficial interactions, Marcus found himself wandering into a quiet bookstore. Among the dusty shelves, he stumbled upon a warm leather-bound volume titled Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. The name grabbed him not because of its fame, but because of the shared name. He took the book home as if it were a talisman. That night, under the dim light, Marcus read, "Can any person harm you? No. You are immune if you can control your own will." The words pierced his heart. The idea that he need not depend on others' judgment to find worth was revolutionary. As he delved deeper into Stoic philosophy, Marcus encountered a paradox. It was the bitter truth that no one cared that could actually set a person free. No longer tethered to the fragile chains of external validation, he could begin to build an inner fortress. But the journey was neither quick nor painless. Initially, letting go of his desperate need for others' recognition felt like relinquishing his identity. How could he exist if the applause stopped? Stoicism, however, offered a different vision, rooted in the ancient wisdom of the Stoics, who had faced trials and betrayals far harsher than any unfollow or ignored message. They taught that the only thing truly within our power is our response to events, not the events themselves. Marcus spent weeks practicing this shift, observing his reactions, challenging his assumptions, and steadily peeling away layers of dependency on others' approval. Still, the deeper he went, the more questions emerged. If no one cared, how did that affect his relationships? Could compassion and connection exist authentically without expectation? As these doubts haunted Marcus, he knew the first step was to embrace the truth without flinching. This acceptance was the gateway to profound change, yet the road ahead remained uncertain, lined with more discomfort than reassurance. Having felt the bitter sting of indifference, Marcus now faced a new challenge: how to navigate a world where no one would rescue him and where resilience had to be kindled from within. What awaited him beyond this realization? To witness Marcus's transformation is to explore a profound paradox. The harshness of uncaring others may, counterintuitively, become the furnace that forges an unbreakable spirit. But before we journey further into his awakening, reflect: do you sense this truth in your own life? If so, how might acceptance change your path? Subscribe now and share your thoughts below, because this revelation will challenge everything you assumed about care, connection, and control. Marcus's awakening unfolded slowly, like the dawn's reluctant light after a long, dark night. The initial shock of realizing no one cared had left him numb, but in that numbness, a hidden clarity stirred. Stoicism taught him that our suffering often comes not from our circumstances, but from how we interpret them. No one's indifference was a judgment on his worth. It was simply the natural fact of life. This understanding sparked a crucial shift. Could stop trying to manipulate opinions and start focusing on what was truly his to command, his own mind and actions. With this new lens, Marcus undertook practical exercises inspired by Stoic wisdom. He began each day contemplating the obstacles he might face, reminding himself that external events were indifferent in nature, and only his judgments could disturb his peace. Practicing negative visualization, he imagined losing his job, his status, even the connections he cherished. This was not pessimism, but preparation to steel himself, so adversity would not shatter him. His social interactions changed, too. No longer dependent on praise, he observed people with detachment and curiosity rather than hunger for approval. He recognized that others, too, were trapped in their dramas, fears, and desires. This empathy, paradoxically born from acknowledging nobody cared specifically for him, expanded his compassion because it highlighted the shared human predicament. Yet, embracing indifference was no immunity against pain. Marcus still wrestled with the sting of rejection and the ache of loneliness. Stoicism's guidance was not to suppress emotions, but to channel reason to master them. During heated moments, he'd pause, asking himself, "Is this within my control? If not, why waste energy?" Such discipline slowly enhanced his resilience. Slowly, Marcus saw that the common cultural narrative of needing others' validation to feel alive was a trap that bred anxiety and unhappiness. Freedom lay beyond this trapped freedom to act virtuously and to live with integrity regardless of acclaim. This insight emboldened him to pursue goals aligned with his values rather than others' expectations. Work became a field of practice rather than a stage for approval. Marcus found joy in small victories and in improvement itself, not in external rewards. Yet, this intensely personal journey had an unexpected social consequence. Relationships began to shift. Some friends, threatened by his detachment, pulled away. Others gravitated closer, drawn to the calm strength he radiated. Here was a paradox. When Marcus stopped craving care, he paradoxically became more capable of genuine care. He listened without gasping for reciprocation, loved without demanding, and accepted others for what they were, not for what he wanted them to be. The liberating acceptance of indifference freed him from the self-centered obsession with being noticed and liked. But with freedom came responsibility. Marcus realized that if no one cared for him, he must cultivate self-care and self-discipline to navigate challenges. Here Stoic practice deepened. The cultivation of self-discipline through daily habits, rigorous honesty with oneself, and the resolve to act rightly no matter the outcome. His mind was no longer a battlefield of anxiety over others' opinions, but a calm harbor from which he steered his life. This journey brought him to an extraordinary question. If no one cares about you personally, why is it worth living with virtue and meaning? The answer lay in the Stoic understanding of nature and reason. Virtue is valuable not because it attracts applause, but because it is the expression of our rational nature aligned with the greater cosmos. By acting justly, courageously, wisely, we participate in a universal order that transcends personal recognition. Though daunting, Marcus embraced this cosmic responsibility. Yet, just as he was reaching these higher realizations, life tested him severely. An unexpected crisis loomed that would challenge every lesson he had learned. Would Marcus's unshakable inner fortress hold firm or crumble under pressure? The next chapter reveals the trial that defined whether Stoicism was mere theory or lived reality. The turning point in Marcus's transformation arrived suddenly and without mercy. His company announced widespread layoffs due to economic downturn, a fate that sealed the precariousness of his job. Despite his years of dedication, Marcus found his name on the list. The announcement was a seismic blow. In that moment, every deep Stoic principle internalized in quiet study faced a brutal test. As he packed up his belongings, the first wave of emotion was bitter anger. Had no one cared enough to shield him from this? The next was fear what would become of him without steady income or esteem. Yet more profoundly than fear or anger, Marcus felt solitude, the relentless aloneness the acceptance of no one caring had revealed. This crisis stripped away all illusions. No colleague offered consolation beyond thin veneer politeness. The world carried on, indifferent and unchanging. But the true ordeal was internal. Would Marcus abandon his new understanding under the weight of hardship, or embody it entirely? Drawing deeply on Stoic endurance, Marcus reminded himself that external events were beyond control. The layoff, however painful, was inevitable in the grand flux of fortune. His task was to respond virtuously, with courage and wisdom, not despair. With woeful humility, Marcus sat alone in the empty office. He rehearsed the Stoic dichotomy of control. What remains his power are his thoughts, choices, and purpose. This meant refusing to see himself as a victim, and instead as an agent within limits. Yet the old habits of seeking consolation in others surfaced. The realization dawned that no rescue was coming. This isolation felt like a void ready to devour hope. At this abyss, Marcus made a fateful decision. He would prove his philosophy not by comfort, but through endurance. Days turned into weeks. Marcus used the time to rekindle his growth. He immersed himself in discipline, structuring his hours for study, physical exercise, and reflection. Each morning began with journaling the obstacles he faced and reaffirming his commitment to virtue regardless of outcome. This rigorous self-mastery was a rebellion against despair. But the world outside offered no easy path. Job searches went unanswered, connections proved hollow, and savings dwindled. The temptation to blame others or fate whispered loudly. Yet Marcus held firm, constantly repeating to himself the Stoic counsel. Pain is in the mind. Victory is within reason. His transformation started influencing those near him unexpectedly. Friends who once sought his approval now admired his calm resolve. A mentor reached out, offering guidance without pity. Marcus found a subtle but powerful truth. Acceptance of no one caring had liberated more than just his spirit. It had revealed the rare possibility of authentic human connection, born not from dependency, but from integrity and strength. Yet even as Marcus gathered strength, doubts nagged mercilessly. Was this life of Stoic endurance enough? Could serenity in adversity satisfy the deep human hunger for recognition and love? Or was Marcus doomed to walk a lonely path, admired but isolated? The most strenuous test still awaited him, one that would cut to the core of his newfound philosophy. The next chapter reveals a Etan encounter that would confront Marcus with the ultimate question of Stoicism: how to act when care is absent and stakes are life and death. Amid the grinding monotony of unemployment and quiet days spent in introspection, Marcus encountered a crisis far beyond career uncertainty. One evening, walking across a desolate bridge, he witnessed a stranger collapse suddenly into the water below. Without hesitation, Marcus leapt after him, plunging into the cold darkness. The stranger struggled, panic in his eyes. Marcus's muscles burned with exertion as he fought against swift currents, a terrible force of nature indifferent to human suffering. It was here, in this raw confrontation with survival, that Marcus's philosophy faced its ultimate trial. Would his acceptance that no one truly cares strengthen him or render him helpless? Fighting for breath, Marcus recalled the Stoic ideal of amor facia loving, embrace of fate no matter the hardship. His mind sharpened, suppressing panic and focusing on what he could control: his strokes, his grip, his resolve. He grabbed the stranger's arm, dragging him toward the bank with every ounce of willpower remaining. Both gasping on shore, Marcus felt an overwhelming surge of connection as the stranger clasped his hand in gratitude. In that fragile moment, Marcus understood the paradox of Stoic care without attachment. While Stoicism teaches to expect no external care, it also embraces acting with compassion as a moral duty, free from expectations and illusions. Marcus realized that no one caring about him personally did not mean he was to become indifferent to others. Instead, it meant cultivating generosity without dependency. This lesson rippled back to his personal struggles. If no one would rescue him from hardship, then he himself must be his own rescuer. If few would recognize his worth, he must live as if worth exists inherently, not contingently. The rescue he gave to the stranger was an expression of virtue, not a transaction for praise. Returning home soaked and exhausted, Marcus reflected on the Stoic ideal of cosmopolitanism being a citizen of the world, interconnected but autonomous. The indifferent universe offered no guarantees of care or fairness, but it did offer opportunity for meaning through action. However, the encounter also raised challenging questions. How to balance detachment from pain with the urge to engage deeply with life? How to sustain compassion when solitude feels absolute? Marcus began practicing nuanced self-awareness, noting moments when indifference turned into apathy and striving to stay in active care without expectation. His Stoic discipline sharpened into a dynamic tension between endurance and engagement. Yet this delicate balance was soon threatened. News arrived that a close friend, unaware of Marcus's struggles, had fallen gravely ill. Marcus felt an urgent but complicated pull care without attachment, love without clinging. How would his philosophy hold when the people he cared for suffered, and no care in return was assured? The tender vulnerability of friendship cast new shadows on Marcus's journey. Would acceptance of indifference corrode empathy or deepen it? As doubts mingled with resolve, Marcus knew his story was nowhere near finished. The next step would test his Stoic resilience more profoundly than before, revealing whether his transformation could truly withstand the unpredictable storms of life. Marcus stood at a crossroads, watching helplessly as the illness ravaged his friend's strength. Their conversations grew sparse, fraught with pain and uncertainty. Marcus's Stoic training told him to accept fate without complaint, to focus on what he could control. But the rawness of watching someone he cared for suffer challenged every philosophical principle. Why endure without anger? How to maintain equanimity when loved ones suffer? Marcus dove even deeper into the core of Stoic texts, seeking guidance. Epictetus echoed in his mind, "It is not events themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." He began examining his judgments, distinguishing between natural grief and destructive despair. This mental discipline allowed him to grieve honestly without being consumed by it. He committed to presencing there for his friend, not as a savior, but as a steady support, a witness without expectation. This was a radical act, born of the painful acceptance that no one ultimately cared for him in a way that guaranteed support. Yet, in offering care to another without craving reciprocity, Marcus found a new sense of peace. Over time, his friend's condition stabilized but remained fragile. Marcus cultivated patience, understanding that life's uncertainty spared no one. His growth matured into profound resilience, tempered by humility. The paradox was now clearer than ever. Accepting the fundamental indifference of others did not lead to bitterness, but to freedom, to act virtuously without dependence, without illusion, without suffering from dashed hopes. Marcus's life began to radiate this lesson outward. At work, he took on challenges without fear of recognition. In relationships, he loved fiercely, but without entanglement in outcomes. His mind was disciplined yet tender, his spirit fierce yet serene. Yet just as stability approached, a new tension arose. The temptation to fall back into old coping mechanisms, Lurket's desire for validation, relief, and assurance. These shadows tested Marcus's vigilance. The great challenge of applied Stoicism is not in understanding its precepts in calm moments, but in living them continually, especially when human nature pushes against detachment. Marcus recognized that acceptance of no one caring is not a one-time epiphany, but an ongoing practice. It requires returning daily to the present, to reason, and to virtue as the true sources of strength. As he embraced this, he reached a new level of mastery, a balance between self-discipline and compassionate engagement. Still, something lingered. How to share this wisdom without diluting its power? Marcus knew that transforming one's inner world was only one piece of the puzzle. His journey was also about inspiring others, about how the hardest truths, when faced with courage, create the foundation for a life unshaken by chaos. But could he communicate this without alienating those still longing for external validation? This delicate challenge set the stage for Marcus's final revelation, one that could either empower or isolate him forever. If you found value in Marcus's journey, don't forget to subscribe and share your reflections below. How do you balance care and indifference in your own life? With years of struggle behind him and a renewed vision before him, Marcus resolved to embody and share the profound teachings he had embraced. He began speaking openly about the hardest truth he had learned, that no one truly cares enough to save us, that this acceptance is not despair, but a gateway to inner freedom. Marcus understood that many recoil from this idea, equating it with cynicism or coldness. But he sought to explain that accepting no one cares does not mean abandoning empathy or community. Rather, it means freeing oneself from destructive dependence and false hope. In his talks and writings, Marcus articulated practical methods for cultivating resilience and virtue in a world indifferent to personal struggles. He emphasized simple daily practice reflection on what is within our control, preparation for hardship through negative visualization, disciplined self-talk, and compassionate detachment. His message resonated especially with those overwhelmed by social anxieties, fear of rejection, or the exhaustion of chasing endless approval. Marcus's story became a living example of the Stoic ideal in a modern context, proof that acceptance of indifference could coexist with kindness, ambition with humility, solitude with meaningful connection. Yet, even as he built a following, Marcus continued his own inner work, aware that no philosophy is ever completed, but lived moment by moment. He faced setbacks, moments of doubt, and the relentless pull of old habits. Through this, he maintained a candid honesty in sharing both the light and shadow of the journey. The final and most profound realization dawned slowly, that the heart of Stoicism is paradoxical strength nurtured in vulnerability, care that flows without expectation, freedom in acknowledging solitude. Marcus came to see his life as a microcosm of the Stoic lesson. The universe is indifferent. Others will not save us. But within this cosmic indifference lies a profound invitation to courageous self-mastery and authentic love. The ultimate transformation was no longer about gaining control over the outer world, but mastering the inner realm, finding peace amid impermanence, and acting with purpose without the illusion of guarantees. Marcus understood that the acceptance that no one cares changed everything because it shattered illusions and revealed the true sources of strength, reason, virtue, and the courageous embrace of reality. His story is an invitation to all who struggle with loneliness and the fear of insignificance, to face the truth boldly, transform suffering into power, and live a life unshakable in its quiet dignity. This acceptance is not defeat, but liberation's core message of Stoicism made real. As you close this journey, ask yourself, when you accept that no one truly cares, what will you do differently? How will you harness this freedom? The path is yours to choose, and Marcus's story assures you that everything can change once you accept this profound, liberating truth.